Good morning and welcome back to Mojospresso, a caffeine-inspired shot of inspiration and perspective to help you on your Friday with the goal to win the morning and win the day. A shout out to all our Paralympians who were sitting equal first on the medal tally after the first couple of days in the world, and also to Dylan Alcott, a Mojo friend who starts his campaign later today. Okay, to this week's theme, which, similar to last week's theme on the power of questions, is something you may never have thought about, but can completely alter your perspective, especially in difficult times. And that is the power of dedication. Dedicate simply means to devote your time and effort to a particular person or purpose. And you can dedicate anything. Yeah, you can dedicate a moment, a day, a performance, a tournament, the last 3 months of your Year 12 career, a pandemic, a life, or just a way to live your life to someone who in some small way has inspired you to keep going. And you might not even know them, but the way they lived their life or what they stood for or their courage in the face of adversity. Or maybe you do know them and the little things they do for others or for you to encourage you to keep going. When you dedicate a part of you to someone else, it gives that part of you a meaning, a depth that wasn't there beforehand. And when we create more meaning through the power of dedication, it's amazing what happens to our perspective and our ability to keep going. When I first moved back to Australia in 2001, my very first client was Rob Dixon, also the first winner of Survivor in Australia, but still the best video storyteller that I've ever met. When Rob was tragically killed a few years later with his 2 boys while filming in South Africa, I decided to, well, first and foremost, I've never cried so hard at a funeral, but secondly, I decided to dedicate all my public talks to Rob for the rest of my life. And now every time I get up to give a talk, I see Rob smile and it relaxes me. Most people get nervous before public speaking, but when you realize it's firstly not about you, but secondly it's about the audience, and for me it's also about Rob, and it's amazing how much easier public speaking becomes for me in that situation. You can dedicate, something can be big or small. You might simply dedicate your Wednesday mornings to an elderly neighbour who's incapacitated and can't bring his or her rubbish bins in. Or you might simply dedicate your job to your work colleagues or mates who have been stood down from their jobs. Dedication comes to life in so many different ways. Alistair Clarkson's been taking young footballers to Kokoda for the last 15 years to remind them of Australian boys who 100 years earlier, pretty much at the same age, dedicated their lives to protecting their country and never came home. The Australian cricket team do something very similar, visiting Gallipoli. These experiences alter our perspective from one of entitlement to one of appreciation, and then into dedication. Or you might choose to dedicate a particular performance. One of the most powerful ways for an athlete to gain inspiration is to dedicate their performance to someone else. It might be a mum, a dad, a brother, a sister, a neighbour, a coach, an ex-coach, a friend or a grandparent, but someone has helped them get to where they are today. And every time they go for the ball, they dedicate themselves to that person. It might be a hero, or a friend. Ash Barty dedicated her Wimbledon campaign to her hero and friend, Yvonne Goolagong. Before Richmond's 2019 grand final victory, Coach Damien Hardwick gave each player a rock and asked the players to dedicate their performance to someone who had special meaning to them. The players were asked to write their name on the rock and kept the rock in their locker room until the end of the game. The rest is history. Melbourne City coach Patrick Kisnorbo used a similar power of dedication before this year's grand final and then became the first A-League coach in history to win both the plate and the championship in his first year as coach. The amazing thing about the power of dedication is it removes all sense of ego and fear because you're not doing it for yourself anymore. You're dedicating that action or that event or that performance to someone else. And then that performance goes to a much deeper level, or a much higher spiritual place. You might just simply decide to dedicate acting responsibly through this pandemic to a nurse that you might know, or a frontline worker who's doing it tough right now. For me, the true power of dedication is it alters our perspective from I to we, and gives additional meaning to keep going. Viktor Frankl made dedication famous in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he tells the story of saving 3 prisoners from suicide in Auschwitz by helping them find meaning in their lives and dedicating their survival to someone else. For one, it was a daughter waiting for him on the other side. And for another, it was a scientist who had a piece of unfinished research that the world desperately needed to see. Dedication can even reduce anxiety or reframe our perspective from what we thought was important to what really is important. In 2011, Rory McIlroy experienced a very public meltdown in the last round of the US Masters. After the event, he went to Haiti as a UNICEF ambassador, and where he saw the damage from the 2010 earthquake, which had completely ravaged the country. Rory said, I've just been in a place where millions of people have no clean water and millions of kids are without education, and I'm getting nervous about hitting a golf ball into some water. After that visit, Rory dedicated a part of himself to the people of Haiti, which altered his perspective. And 2 months later, he won the US Open by 8 shots. In particular, when you're lacking motivation, dedication can completely reinvigorate your career. Andre Agassi, after losing his way and blowing out from number 1 in the world to 141 in the world, dedicated his career to kids at risk of not getting an education or rebelling against education. And playing with that purpose and sense of meaning, he got back to number 1 in the world, won another 4 Grand Slams, and set up a $1 billion business and set up 64 charter schools across North America, affecting millions of kids who otherwise wouldn't have got an education. I vividly remember Pete Sampras in 1996 struggle through a quarterfinal match against Jim Courier at the Australian Open. Pete's coach and close friend of ours, Tim Gullickson, had been rushed to hospital a few days earlier with a brain tumour, which would later take his life. Pete was 2 sets to love down halfway through the 3rd set when someone in the crowd yelled, "Do it for Gully." Well, Pete immediately broke down on centre court for a couple of minutes, then composed himself and went on to win the next 3 sets, telling reporters after the match that all he could see was Gully's face through that whole match. When we humanise our efforts and dedicate them to others, especially role models, we end up asking ourselves, what would they do? What would my mum do here? How would my sister handle this? And in this way, dedication can actually help us problem solve with a beautiful mix of imagination and memory and curiosity. So if you're struggling for motivation or inspiration at the moment, maybe, just maybe, the power of dedication can help you alter your perspective and help you feel not so alone along your journey. So that's it for another episode of Mojospresso. Here's to winning Friday mornings. And until next time, I will love you and leave you and see you on the other side in the soup.